You may be wondering why I decided to do this video. Going through the two videos by the two YouTubers that are listed in the front. And it is because there is many things wrong with their arguments because they're not giving the essential definers of feminism. First of all, feminism is not a single wave movement. It is minimum 3 waves. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a problem between the two that I feel I must go to, and I'm going to tell you based on an actual dictionary's definition. Onision actually used the Wikipedia kind of definition, so I'm not trusting that. The belief, the full definition, the theory of political, economic, and social equality of the sexes, organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. That is the Merriam-Webster's definition of feminism. But there was also something referred to as egalitarian, and I must also go to and express what egalitarian now the definition of egalitarianism is a belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political, and economic affairs, a social philosophy advocating for the removal of inequalities among people. Now, this is where Hunter Avalon is actually correct. There is a sideways connotation and a sideways understanding, slight difference between feminism and egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is the complete and full work toward equaling everything amongst every ethnicity, social group, race, gender, whereas sexism tends to not sexism, feminism. Yes, sexism is also a problem, but feminism tends to focus on the female side of that equation rather than all the gist. But I must also say that classical feminism is different than the thought of what is going on today. This is where Onision is actually stronger in. There is by an article by Martha Rapton from Pacific University in Oregon, and she says the first wave of feminism took place in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, emerging out of an environment of urban industrialism, liberal and socialist politics. The goal of this wave was to open up opportunities for women with focus on suffrage, which, for those of you who don't know what suffrage is, that is an old term for voting rights. So it was the right to vote movement was first wave feminism. But then we get to second wave, which was in the 60s and continued into the 90s. This wave unfolded in the context of the anti-war civil rights movement's growing self-consciousness of variety minority groups around the world. Now, the new left was on the rise, and the voice of the second wave was increasingly radical. In this phase, sexuality and reproductive rights were the dominant issues of the movement's energy, and was focused on passing equal rights amendments to the Constitution guaranteeing social equality regardless of sex. Now, notice a theme. Important barrier breaking was happening with these waves. And the third wave, mid to late 90s, was informed by post-colonial, postmodern thinking. In this phase, many constructs were destabilized, including notions of universal womanhood, body, gender, sexuality, heteronormativity. Basically, the old feminine look. Liberation. A little out there, but not bad. And, well, the fourth wave is not something that is altogether accepted as in philosophy circles as a legitimate wave, but it basically is the radicalization. And the fourth wave is where they view that the first and second wave of feminism actually failed, when, if you look at factually, they have succeeded. Um, I want to also, for those of you who are wondering about facts, I'm including a couple clip videos from factual feminist Christine Haas Summers in this video, and I'll be back afterwards giving my commentary.
Now, if you are willing to cherry pick, stretch the truth a bit, suppress counter evidence, you can easily make it seem like women are the have-nots in our society. You point to the wage gap, the glass ceiling. You focus on women's vulnerability to body shaming, sexual objectification, manspreading, street harassment, intimate partner violence, and before long, you will have constructed a full-scale patriarchy. And we have hundreds of women's groups who do just that. They specialize in persuading us that Venus is victimized and Mars is privileged. Well, here's the problem. Women's advocacy groups tend to exaggerate the plight of Venus and ignore the troubles of Mars. And as I've tried to show in earlier segments of this series, most of the standard feminist injustice statistics are exaggerated or just plain wrong. It's not true that women are being cheated out of 23% of their salaries, or that 1 in 5 will be victims of sexual assault. And it's also the case that in many critical domains, women are faring far better than men. Let's consider a few. Take education. There, it is women who are the privileged sex. At every level of education, from preschool to graduate school, and across ethnic and class lines, women get better grades, they win most of the honors and prizes, and they're far more likely to go to college. Today, women earn a majority of bachelor's degrees and advanced degrees. Our schools do a much better job educating women than men. Now look at the workplace. Women's groups focus a lot of attention on people at the pinnacle of achievement, CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations, or tenured physics professors at MIT, or U.S. senators. And they're right, there are too few women. But what happens when you consider the entire workforce? There may be a few women, but the lethal professions are largely a male preserve. And as my favorite dissident feminist, Camille Paglia, has noted, quote, "It is overwhelmingly men who do the dirty, dangerous work of building roads, pouring concrete, laying bricks, tarring roofs, hanging electric wires, excavating natural gas and sewage lines, cutting and clearing trees, and bulldozing." Well, is it any surprise that the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that every year about 5,000 Americans die in workplace accidents? 92% of them men. Now, we hear all about the Fortune 500 CEOs, but what about the unfortunate 4,600? Now, alongside male salaries, perhaps some mention should be made of male sacrifice. Now, whenever distressed gender warriors draw up lists of male advantages, they almost always mention men's freedom from fear of being attacked. Now, it's true that women are much more likely to be victims of rape and sexual assault, but men are more likely to be victims of violent crime as a whole. And consider campus crime. It's actually men who need safe spaces more than women, because according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, men are twice as likely to be victims of violent crime on campus. Look at the overall murder rate in our society. There were approximately 12,000 murder victims in 2013. 78% were men. And even on the internet, men face as much or more bullying than women. According to the Pew Research Center, more women than men are sexually harassed, but men are the primary targets of threats. And here are some more facts that challenge the male privilege mantra. Suicide, 78% male. Incarceration, 93% of federal inmates are male. And even when men and women commit the same crime and have similar criminal histories, men receive 63% longer prison sentences on average. Homelessness, it's estimated that about 60% of homeless individuals are male. Combat, 85% of active duty soldiers are men. And though there are many women serving in the armed services, fewer than 8% profess a desire to engage in combat. If you visit a veterans hospital or a rehabilitation center, male privilege is not the first idea that will come to your mind. And now for the mother of all gender gaps, life expectancy. Women's average life expectancy is nearly 5 years longer than men's. Men have to be the only oppressor class in history who are less educated, more victimized, and have shorter lives than those they oppress. They must be the only oppressor class who have claimed society's gritty, dangerous jobs as their exclusive preserve. Well, the factual feminist verdict: modern life is a complicated mix of burdens and benefits for each sex. Men and women enjoy distinctive advantages and face distinctive challenges. So if men have to check their privilege, then so do women. But why play this game? Why do so many activists want to promote gender resentment and divisiveness? Men and women are not two opposing teams competing for some trophy. We are in this together. Our fates are intimately connected. And as one wit has observed, nobody will ever win the battle of the sexes. Too much fraternizing with the enemy. Well, my advice: let's dispense with the bitter rhetoric about male privilege and get on with the fraternizing, or sororitizing, as I prefer to say.
See, this is where it gets interesting, because I'm going to comment about some errors that Onision makes. And I'm not going to do this in a hateful, vengeful way, but Twitter followers, people that you already know are in support of your views, are an automatic bias. Second, this is not a blind, double-blind question answer, because it is you, the celebrity or YouTuber, asking the question. So you will have some just trying to make themselves look a part of the community in that. And three, the sampling is never respective of the general population through a Twitter poll. So Twitter polls almost are the third level of evidence. First primary, secondary, and then last low weight. So Twitter polls I would put in the low weight category. Not completely dismiss them, but because they can be easily punched through based on that logic that I just explained, be a low level evidence. Polling by policy data, houses, and so forth are much more likely to have better data. And as you can see, Christina Hoff Sommers has used some of the best data out there about the male side of the spectrum. And she is going to do that about several common myths, too. I don't want you guys to think I'm going to leave Hunter Evelyn alone in this, in a logical fallacy argument. When you get off the topic of the subject and content evidence into name calling, both sides, you've diminished the quality of the discussion. I believe strongly in vigorous debate, but vigorous debate in a quality forum. So I'm not going to call you guys any nasty names. I'm just going to urge you that if you have such a another squabble like such, that you consider holding the personal attacks and just letting the expression of your evidence speak through. Now, for you guys, it might be tough. But for me, it's not. I believe you have strong opinions. But here's the question. Can your strong opinions stand up on their own without personal character attacks? I don't personally know either one of you. But this is a question that you have to ask yourself. And those of you viewing, you might also have to ask of yourself on your view. Can your position, with the evidence that you have, can it stand up without a character attack of an opposing side? I practice that every single time I look at things. Both political discussion, religious discussion, many other subjects. That is the way I prefer to handle things. I may get angry at times and blow up, but it is usually on a rare occasion, and it's usually not taped or recorded like this. So I do thank you. And now we'll go to the myth, the feminist myths that Christina Hoff Sommers has for us. Again, thank you for watching, and have a nice day. I'll be back at the end.
Myth number 1. Women are half the world's population, working 2/3 of the world's working hours, receiving 10% of the world's income, and owning less than 1% of the world's property. Well, this faux fact is routinely quoted by advocacy groups, by the World Bank, Oxfam, the United Nations, but it's a fabrication. More than 15 years ago, 2 Sussex University experts on gender and development explained that the slogan was simply made up by somebody at the UN back in the 80s, and it just seemed sort of right to that person. There's no evidence that it was ever accurate, and it's certainly not accurate today. In Africa, for example, Yale economist Cheryl Doss found that female land ownership ranged from 11% in Senegal to 54% in Rwanda and Burundi. Next myth. Between 100,000 and 300,000 girls are sold into slavery each year in the United States. Now, this sensational claim is a favorite of celebrities, journalists, advocates, politicians, both conservative and liberal, by the way. The source for the figure is a 2001 report on child sexual exploitation, but that 100 to 300,000 figure referred to children at risk for exploitation, not actual victims. And as one of the authors made clear in an email exchange that he had with the Village Voice, the actual number of children abducted and pressed into sexual slavery is, quote, a few hundred. That's still 100 too many, but they're not going to be helped by a 1,000-fold inflation of the number. Next myth. In the United States, 22 to 35% of women who visit emergency rooms do so because of domestic violence. Now, this claim has appeared in countless fact sheets, books, articles. It's in the Penguin Atlas on Women. They use this emergency room figure to justify placing the United States on par with Uganda and Haiti for intimate violence. Well, what is the source? It seems that several feminist scholars misunderstood a 1997 study by the Justice Department. The correct figure is not 22 to 35%, but get ready, less than 0.5%. Next myth, 1 in 5 college women will be sexually assaulted. Now this incendiary figure is everywhere in the media today. The 1 in 5 figure is based on a survey called the Campus Sexual Assault Study. But 2 prominent criminologists have noted fatal flaws. It had a very low response rate, a non-representative sample of respondents, and an overly broad definition of what counts as assault. I mean, it included such things as attempted forced kissing or intimate encounters while intoxicated. Now, defenders of the 1 in 5 figure will reply that the finding has been replicated by other studies, but these studies suffer from the same sorts of flaws. Now, the best study that we have on sexual assault on campus suggests the figures are closer to 1 in 40, not 1 in 4. 1 in 40 is still bad, but apparently not bad enough for the activists. And now for the mother of all feminist factoids. Women earn 77 cents for every dollar a man earns for doing the same work. Now, no matter how many times this wage gap claim is decisively refuted by economists, including feminist economists, it always comes back. The bottom line, the 23-cent gender pay gap is simply the difference between the average earnings of all men and women working full-time. It doesn't take into account differences in occupation, positions, education, job tenure, hours worked per week. When such relevant factors are considered, the wage gap narrows to the point of vanishing. Now, wage gap activists will say, no, women with identical backgrounds and jobs as men, they still earn less. But they always fail to take into account critical variables. I mean, why play this game? Now, all of these reckless claims are nearly impossible to correct because armies of advocates, journalists, political leaders, they depend on killer stats to promote their cause. And I guess there's also an admirable human tendency to be protective of women, and stories of female exploitation are readily believed. But killer stats undermine good causes, and they send scarce resources in the wrong direction. My advice to women advocates, take back the truth.
Now, is feminism overall a good thing or a bad thing? And does it still have relevance? Well, frankly, it still does have relevance. And it is good and noble when it actually addresses real problems. I know I'm a man, but it seems today a lot of the focus on feminism has shifted from pragmatic, real issues to issues that will not help. And as long as feminism is in that mindset, it is self-destructive. Now, what is my verdict on between these 2 videos that I set out to look at? The verdict is they are both somewhat right in areas and somewhat wrong in areas. Hunter Avalon and Onision lack critical elements of understanding feminism. The understanding that Hunter Avalon is using is that of fourth wave feminism, whereas what Onision is referring to is between the first, second, and third wave, the pragmatic feminism movements. Second, the second error that both of them have, I have mentioned this earlier, is personal attacks that does not do anything to help prove or disprove a position or a point. That actually can actually distract from seriously dangerous, erroneous data, which, considering they both have elements that are good and correct, and areas that aren't, I'm assuming that there are lacking areas. Like the polling that Onision tended to quote was unreliable due to set bias built into the method. Then there's a lack of referencing actual research on the Hunter Avalon side of why he rejected certain things. Where I have a load full of things that I will be sharing in my YouTube video description to explain data-wise what I'm sharing. I also want to explain the last part. To seriously sit down and record a video with such vitriol language used usually has one sitting around and actually thinking about their plan. And I'm not sure that they gave much consideration to their formats, where they started attacking each other with their words and not using actual data. Logical fallacies are a deep need to look out for whenever you're looking for at a opposing viewpoint controversial topic. And there are certain things you look for to give you trigger warnings. Is this going to be quality? Is it going to be worthwhile? Well, first of all, the name calling is a big indicator that these aren't quality opinions. That's one hint. It doesn't automatically disqualify it, but it sure gets a dadgum big hint. So, people responding to these videos, I urge you to be careful. Be careful how you respond and what you do. And if you, Onision, and you, Hunter Avalon, are actually watching, I purposely set this up the way I did to try to be respectful toward both of you, but also express what was taught in a college level philosophy class about what feminism really is, and how it applies to our world. Not to shame anyone. So what you have here is the exact same lecture on feminism format-wise as what was taught in the philosophy class. So this is a hot and heavy intro philosophy topic of feminism right on YouTube. And I thank you for your time, and have a nice day.